Okay, we're going to try to stay on schedule as much as we can today. So we're going to jump into our second session here, talking about communicating with family and how to communicate with family. Because if you're like my family, who the six of us all live in six different states now, communication can be challenging. We had a family reunion last summer or last May. The six kids got together and we did some calculating. It was the first time in 11 years that the three brothers had been together, and it was the first time in 20 years that all six of us had been together. So communicating, trying to decide what you're doing for holidays can be a real challenge and can be a difficult time. So need to talk about how we want to do that. Session 2, we're going to talk a little bit about the 3 C's of coping with the holidays. Again, this is borrowed from Dr. Kenneth Doka, who is considered one of the top experts in grief and loss in this field. And he just says, with the roller coaster-like emotions of grief, the holidays can be a special, tough time. Remember that Hanukkah, that Aunt Sophia danced in the snow, that Christmas that we received a bike, and that Thanksgiving when the turkey was undercooked. These memories remind us of our loss. Other reminders, such as cards addressed to the person who died, holiday movies, gifts that seem perfect can make us feel out of sorts with the season. Everyone else seems so happy and joyful. Elvis Presley sang about a blue, blue Christmas because he lost his girlfriend, but whoever she was. But the point is, the holidays will be different this year. In fact, they may never be the same again. And so we have to recognize that and understand it. When my mother was the first one who passed in our family, I was only 24 years old at the time. I always qualify this by telling people I'm an older baby. By that I mean my parents were a lot older when I was born. Okay, so my mom was 40 and my dad was 45 when I came into the world. My brother, who is 6 years older than me, was an accident. So I guess that makes me a tragedy. I don't know. Never was really quite sure what that meant for me, but if he wasn't wanted, I really know I wasn't wanted. And so Mom was 63 when they found some cancer, and she died 6 months later. And 4 years after that, my dad had a series of strokes, and he died when he was 70. So by the time I was 28 years old, I was what we call an adult orphan, and no longer had parents. The going back home for the holidays was not going to happen anymore for me, and there was a few years, a series of years of adjustments that had to take place, and so it will be different. Some of you will be invited to 4 or 5 different gatherings this year because people know that you're alone or there's been that loss. So, and some of them won't take no for an answer. In fact, they'll just say to you, okay, you're coming to our house this year. And after the third person tells you that, you're thinking, well, I can't be at all of them. Or you don't need to be alone, so you have to do this, and so on and so forth. And so we talk about the 3 C's of communication here, communing with family. First, choose, communicate, and then compromise. And under choosing, basically, we're just talking about you need to decide. It's imperative, I shouldn't say it that way. It's important that you decide what you want to do this year for the holidays, okay? Don't allow someone to dictate to you and tell you what you need to do or what they think you should do, okay? Because that may not be what you want to do or what you feel like you can do. And so in the next couple of pages here, I'm going to give you tons of things that you need to think about as you enter into the holidays that may just look totally different this year, and it's okay. I was talking to someone just before we started the first session, talked about how Thanksgiving was totally different this year, just because nobody really felt up to doing what they had always done, and that's okay. I've had some families tell me this. I said, what'd you do for Christmas this year? And they said, it was just going to be too hard. We packed up everybody. We went to Disneyland, and ended up in Florida, and that's okay. Okay, maybe you'll be more ready to bring in some traditions and bring back some of the older traditions again next year. But Christmas and the holidays are so full of family traditions. And when we start to review them all, we have to say, what can I do? What can I not do? What am I up to? What do I not want to do? Some of these things I just don't want to do. Maybe that was my wife's thing. That was my husband's thing. I got a call one day from a lady whose her 40-year-old husband had died suddenly. And he was huge into Christmas. He would decorate the whole house. He had the whole Santa and reindeer on the roof, all of that stuff. And she said, I would just come home from work one day and it would all be done. That was his thing. And she said, I didn't even really care if it got done or not. Problem was, I had a 16-year-old son, and he was so used to that. I mean, that's what the holidays were. And she called me. She was in a panic, and she said, I've got all this stuff in the garage. I don't even know how to plug into extension cords, let alone get all this stuff out. She said, what do I do? And we had to have some talks. We had to talk about a lot of the things we'll talk about in this session, just talking, having conversations with family, helping her son understand, hey, it may not be this big this year. We're going to have to scale down a little bit because he didn't know how to do it, and she didn't know how to do it. And she said, I didn't really, well, never in that Christmas that much anyway, so I didn't want to do that anyway. So just kind of, you're going to have to decide maybe where you're going to have dinner this year. If you're like some folks, well, mom was gone this year, so it just does, why would we go to mom's? And so let's go to this sister's house. And that sister's like, what do you mean? My house isn't big enough. That means I'm responsible for everything. Yeah, that'll be fine. Well, it's not fine for her, right? She's all of a sudden, I'm going to have 40 people in my house, and so that's going to be a problem. So these are things that have to be talked about. You might, maybe you'll want to get together with church family this year, maybe find some others, maybe even in this group here that say, I don't have anywhere to go this year. I don't know what to do. So can we do something? Maybe just gathering with some other friends who have had a loss maybe this sometime. The important thing is you choosing what you want to do, okay? And then communicating, and this is really the big second C, is communicating that with your family. And just simply saying to them, listen, I'm not up to that this year. Maybe that day when I wake up Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, whenever your family gets together, I might be up to it that day, but maybe I won't either. Is it okay if I let you know on that day? Can I just call you and say, hey, listen, I'll come over, or maybe I'll come over for a little while. I had one gentleman call me, and he said, I don't know what to do. He said, my kids want me to be at their house all day long. They want me there early in the morning when the kids come running down the stairs and getting the presents under the tree and all that kind of stuff. And he said, I love my kids. He said, and I love my grandkids. He said, but my grandkids are screamers. And he said, there was a reason why we loved to send them back to their house, and the reasons why we didn't live together. They had their house and we had our house. And he said, I can handle that for about an hour and a half. He said, but after that, he said, I want to scream. And he said, I don't think that's appropriate. And he said, they're just screamers. And he said, what do I do? And so we talked about some ideas and finally kind of settled on the fact that he said, he finally told his family, he said, listen, I'll tell you what, I'll come for dinner. But after dinner, he was going to meet with a friend of his at a restaurant and have a piece of pie or have some coffee and pie, and kind of break it up like that. That he said, I know I can handle that. He said, I won't be able to handle the other. There's just no way that I can do that all day long. But his kids weren't taking no for an answer. They're like, come on, Dad, you have to be with us. And I know the kids meant well. They wanted him there. They wanted everybody around and do the same thing. But he just wasn't up to that. So you have to communicate that. Sometimes other families feel like it's, especially if the loss is more recent, say in the last few months, decorating for Christmas can kind of feel dishonoring to the one who has died. We shouldn't celebrate and have a big Christmas this year because this person died in our family. The other side of the family is like, no, we need to do it 3 times as big in their honor, and we need to really buy more decorations because they love the holidays. And you'll have to talk about that and compromise. A good example that Ladoka shares is a family who lost their son in the war. And they got the word in October that he had died. He'd been killed in action. And some of the family were like, well, we don't want to do a tree this year. We don't even want to do Christmas. The mom was like, no, I want to honor my son's memory, and I want to do a big tree. In fact, I want the biggest tree we've ever had. I want it decorated in red, white, and blue. And she wanted to go great guns. And finally, they compromised in that, which is the third C. They kind of came together and said, let's do a tree. We won't do it in the big family room. We'll do it kind of in the other room in the house, and we'll have the tree there. Scale it down a little bit. Those who want to come for the meal and the Christmas, they can do that. Those who don't feel up to it, don't feel like they can, they're okay with that too. This isn't Christmas related, but I had a family a few years ago who lost a 22-year-old daughter. She was actually sick on our service and died on December 31st. She had been diagnosed exactly a year before on December 31st. A brain tumor she had when she was a little baby came back, and after going into remission for 20 years, it came back, and then she died on our service on New Year's Eve. The family decided, they all agreed Christmas wasn't going to be the same. They had Christmas a couple of weeks later after it was all done, and he said it was very low-key, and we exchanged presents. We all went home. But he called me in panic about 3 weeks later. He said, we don't know what to do. He said, we hadn't even thought about this, but her birthday was the first week of February. And he said, we don't know if we should celebrate her birthday or what we should do. And he said, how are we going to handle this? And so they got the family together. They had 5 kids. She was the middle child that passed away. 2 of the kids didn't want to do anything for her birthday. 2 of the other kids wanted to still have a birthday party with cake, ice cream, the whole bit, and invite friends. And he said, what do I do with this? So we talked a little bit. What they eventually did was they said, we're going to have a birthday party. They agreed to do that with cake. The ones that didn't want to come didn't have to come. And they had people bring presents. She was really big into missions. She loved missions work, and I think she sponsored children in Haiti and homeless children, and or adopted children. What do they call that down in Haiti? Something, y'all know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so they brought presents for the mission in Haiti, and after they got all the presents, they donated all those to the mission that she was involved in Haiti. He said we loved it. It was a great idea. Not everybody participated, but that was okay too. But the important thing was they had to talk about it. You know, at first it was just like, we can't do any of these things, but they were still able to do something in her honor. And I saw him years later, and he said, yeah, we still, on that day, we talk about it, and we don't do a full party with cake and ice cream again, but we do have people who will donate in her name to send things down to Haiti. The biggest thing is the compromise. So as we think about those things, you got a page here. It's called Choose What You Do This Year on page 7. Choose what you want to do this year. The idea here is just put a check mark by the things that you know that you definitely want to do the same way, but you may have to look at it and so I don't know if I want to do it the same way, or I don't know if I want to do it at all. If you don't want to do it at all, just scratch it totally off the list there. But Christmas cards. You know, I don't know if anybody even does Christmas cards anymore. I love Christmas cards. I think they're cool. And then I got married, and my wife's like, we got to do Christmas cards? And so for almost 40 years, we haven't done many Christmas cards, and now we almost forget about them. Now we play that game where we mail a Christmas card to the person who sends it to us first. That's kind of, so if you send me a card, you'll probably get one, but it may come after Christmas if you wait too late to mail yours. But, you know, we're going to do them as usual. I got a call from a man in Harrisonville one time, and his wife was the Christmas card queen. She would mail out over 200 cards every year, and he would help her by pulling the stamp off and sticking it on the envelope. And that's all he did. But he said that was her thing. And so he would honor her he said, my handwriting's not very good. And he said, in fact, I don't even read very well. And so he said, but she would want to do those cards, and I'll just stick the stamp on. He said, I was really glad when they went to those sticky stamps instead of the ones I had to lick all those years. But then he called me, you know, a few months later, and he said, Christmas is coming. He said, what am I going to do with all these cards? His daughter lived in Alabama somewhere. She flew home. We had a meeting. We talked about it, and finally whittled the list down to about 40 people. And she agreed to send an update letter and do it. And again, it was all about communication, talking about it, and working through it. And he said, I don't know even how to tell 260 people they're not getting their Christmas card anymore. And we had to assure him it was okay that they didn't get the card that year. So maybe you have to shorten your list. Maybe you send that holiday letter and say, here's what's happened. Or maybe just skip it this year. You know, the world will not end if somebody doesn't get your Christmas card or your Christmas letter, okay? Who knows if they're that interested anyway, right? I mean, come on, let's be real. The decorations, what are you going to do? Same thing as always. Is it going to be different this year? Is it going to be scaled down? Or are we going to increase them? You might have to modify or change them. You may have to ask for some help for other people. It's okay to say, hey, I need help, okay? I'm going to need help with this. Let others do it, maybe. A few years ago, my wife was out of town when it was time to put up the Christmas decorations. She was going to be gone for a while. And I decided I would get out all the decorations and put them in the right place. Yeah. I'm seeing you like, that was dumb. That was stupid. Yeah. So for the next 2 weeks, she put them all in the right places, you know. And I didn't know she had them all labeled. I didn't read labels. I'm a guy, right? So, but you might need help with that this year. This may have been your spouse's thing or your mom's thing or whatever. If you lost a parent and you still have a living parent, you know, what does your dad want to do this year? What does your mom want to do? And you may have to talk to them about that. They may need your help. Maybe we're just not going to decorate this year at all. I do remember a story of one lady, and we share this story in our orientation classes at work. But she said the first Christmas I just decided that I wasn't going to do anything, and the way I would honor my son was to give away all of his stuff. And she said, and about 2 months later, I totally regretted that decision. She said, one, I wish we'd still had Christmas for everybody else in the family. She said, but she said, there were so many of those things I gave away that I wish I'd just hung on a little bit longer. And if you have, we can talk about that later about what we do with our loved ones' things. There's lots of ideas and thoughts about that. Some good books out there, but that may look different. What about shopping? Are you going to shop as usual? Is it going to be the same? Does everybody get gift cards this year? Just to make it easy. And it doesn't have to be for every year going forward, but maybe just this year it needs to be different, right? Because maybe you're just not up to it. You don't want to go to the mall and the ho, ho, ho and jingle, jingle stuff that's all going on. Maybe just shop it, do everything online. Maybe ask others to shop for you. That's a win-win for me right there. If somebody's willing to shop for me, I'm into that, right? But maybe you just need that help. Hey, listen, here's a list of 5 things. Can you just go take care of it for me? And there's probably somebody in your family who loves to shop and spend other people's money, and they'll be glad to do that. Make a list before you go shopping. Make your gifts. That could be an option, but maybe all that just sounds too overwhelming. Maybe do baked goods this year. That can be different. Everybody gets a plate of cookies, okay? And I bought them all at Walmart. That's okay. Shop with a friend. Again, what about holiday music? Okay. We should add to this list. What about Hallmark holiday movies that go year round anyway? What do you do? For some of you, those are huge triggers. And we all know what we mean by triggers that set off the grief and the grief bursts. Some of those things will be things you'll want to talk about and discuss. Maybe you've already tried. You turned on the radio to, 102.9, and you got into the 3rd song and went, oh my gosh, that was Mom's favorite Christmas carol. And you just had that meltdown right on the side of the road. It's okay that you have that, but maybe it's just, like I need to pull back this year a little bit on the Christmas songs and that kind of stuff. Or maybe if you're going to listen to Christmas carols, you do it in your house and you wait for nobody else to be around. You just have a really good cry while you're listening to songs. By the way, I had a lady tell me one day, I asked her, I said, how have you been doing? She said, I had a really, really bad day. I cried all day long. And I tried to help her change her terminology and say, don't say you had a really bad day because you cried. Just say you had a really good cry. Because we need really good cries when we're grieving, right? We need those times we can say, hey, I just looked at pictures and I bawled and it was okay. It was really a good cry. So don't beat yourself up for crying. Crying are God's release points that He's created for us. Those tears He's put in those tear ducts that He gave to you to allow the tears to roll. What about the different traditions? Are you going to keep the same traditions this year? Are you going to modify the traditions a little bit? What are some things that just won't be the same, and that's going to be too hard to do, but what are some things that will be honoring to your loved one? My mother made egg noodles. That was the tradition in our family. Anybody here have the egg noodles? I find they're not as popular as I thought they were. Wow, some of you are really missing out. I'm just telling you, okay? But she would roll them out the night before, and she would sprinkle the thing, and I'd watch her do it, and they were always perfect. They were always incredibly good. I have 3 sisters who, as I said, we don't get together very often for the holidays, but one year they were gathering in Arkansas, and I said, babe, we're going this year for the first time in a long time. I don't have to work on Thanksgiving Day or the week after, so I said, we're going this year because I want to taste my mom's homemade noodles. And so we drove all the way to Arkansas. About halfway, just right before dinner was ready to get ready, we start getting this really weird smell coming from the kitchen. And I don't know a lot about cooking, but I do know if there's a gravy involved, you better be stirring regularly. And somebody wasn't. And they scorched the noodles. And if you've never smelled scorched noodles, that's bad, but you ought to try eating them. In fact, I was so determined to eat those noodles, I said, I'm going to eat them anyway. I drove this far. I drove 4 hours to eat the mom's homemade egg roll noodles that my sister supposedly had. I just realized we're recording this. I'm going to be in big trouble later if they even watch this. But they're drove so far I'm going to eat them. I said, give me a dish. I put a whole batch of them on my plate. I took about 3 bites, and I said, I just can't do it. They were the worst noodles I'd ever had in the world. And to this day, I still haven't had mom's homemade noodles. Although there is a noodle out there now that's pretty darn close that we have found. So, but what do you do with that? Who makes the noodles this year? Who makes the homemade pie that Mom always made that was so fantastic? Can anybody pull it off? Some will try. They probably won't be as good as Mom's. Is that okay? Or can you just not have the holidays if you don't have Mom's pumpkin pie? These are things you need to talk about and discuss and decide what you're going to do. Maybe start a new tradition. We're going to go with a new pie this year. we're not doing the pumpkins anymore because no one can make them like Mom anyway. So we're going with the French silk chocolate pies this year. Or, Sally does a pretty good apple. That's going to become our new tradition. Okay, what do you do with that? So you may have to modify that a little bit. What about church and religious services? Remember, again, we're all grieving differently. For some people, in my mother-in-law's, in my wife's side of the family, her mother-in-law, pretty much the rule always was on Christmas Eve, we were in church. If we showed up at her house for Christmas, there was no question what was happening on Christmas Eve. Everybody went to church. They had one of the granddaughters' birthday was Christmas Eve, so we would always have, I'm sorry, I take that back. Her birthday is Christmas Day, and so we would always have Christmas on Christmas Eve and then celebrate her birthday on the 25th. So if you were at Mom's house, that's what you did. And so I remember, that was her thing. She, so after she died, all the kids were like, "Man, we're in big trouble. If we don't go to Christmas on Christmas Eve, Mom's going to be watching from heaven, and she's going to get us all. If we don't all get to church on Christmas Eve," and then they're like, "Well, do we all meet in Oklahoma?" Well, that was kind of silly because nobody lived in Oklahoma. So what do we do? And they had I thought it was going to be World War III in the family. About we had one sister-in-law that was kind of like, maybe I should call everybody, make sure they're in church. But that was just the big deal. But some people, maybe this first year is like, the last place I want to be is in church. In fact, I'm still a little bit mad at God. In fact, I've got a few things I'd like to tell him. And I don't know if I want to go to church and sing Joy to the World because I don't have a lot of joy right now. And listen, that's normal, that's natural, it's understood, it's okay. We get it, God gets it. It's hard, and it's different this year. So maybe don't attend them at all. Maybe attend a different service, but at a different time or a different place. Maybe another church. That's okay. You won't get kicked out of your church if you go to another holiday in a different church. Maybe you just want to spend some quiet time at home alone. Maybe on that day you want to visit the cemetery, and it's okay. And you take a poinsettia or something. Will you open gifts the same way as usual? The food is a big thing in families. There's a huge deal with families, and so you're going to have to talk about that again and compromise a little bit. Yes, we'll do this. No, we won't do that. You can change the menu a little bit. You're going to go out this year, and again, just because you do it differently this year doesn't mean you have to do it every year. Okay, allow yourself to be flexible. Maybe next year we'll be back up to feel better about doing the whole full blown out thing that we've always done. Okay, and then of course post-Christmas, it doesn't end, does it? Holidays are kind of relentless, starting about October all the way through May, or through June, I should say. What are you going to do post-Christmas? You're going to do New Year's the same way that you've always done. Some of you, New Year's is the farthest away from your mind, and part of my goal today is get you thinking ahead. What do I want to do for New Year's? We're going to do the same thing we've always done. Is it going to look different this year? We're going to invite friends over. I just want to maybe gather with a small group of friends. I'm just going to go to bed early. That's what us old folks do. We just go to bed early at 9 o'clock and don't go anywhere anyway. Do we want to watch a movie? Let me just say this about movies. Be careful what you watch, okay? Unless you know it's a tearjerker, and you're fine with that and feel free to cry, that's good. But if you don't want to be emotional around other people, just be careful what movie you're watching because there's so many I tell people in my grief groups, I'm like, man, turn off the Hallmark Channel for like a year. You won't miss anything anyway. All the movies are the same, so same plot line basically. So, but just turn them off for about a year. Give yourself a chance to heal, okay? Because they show no mercy on those things. So just some questions that go along with this. These aren't your discussion questions for this next part, but it says, what other aspects of the holidays are a concern for you? Maybe I missed something on this list. It's very possible. Is there something else that there's a part of that you're just really worried about or concerned about? And you're like, man, I don't know. This was a big deal for us. Maybe you always went to Tahoe or you always went to Estes Park and you did skiing. That was your holiday trip. How do we pull that off this year? How can you plan and prepare for this concern? What do you do about it? And I think this is the most important question. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And don't let people talk you into doing something you don't want to do this year. And just let them know, I might be up to it next year, okay? Just because you don't go out and celebrate the holidays big time this year doesn't mean you have failed the grief journey, okay? Doesn't mean you have failed this thing that we call grief. You're going through it very normally and naturally, and it's what we would expect, okay? So don't allow people to put pressure on you to do things that you're just not up to doing this year. Um, any questions along those lines? Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned compromise.
Hmm.
You mentioned not starting World War III. How do you deal with people who refuse to compromise or maybe are ignoring others' grief and just like it didn't happen or they
Yeah.
just don't want to even be part of the conversation?
Yeah. That's a great question. Her question was, how do you compromise with people who don't want to compromise, basically? And yeah, all families are the same way. Some people don't even want to talk about the death or talk about the emotions that come with it. And there again, I think that's where you have to choose to express to them that where you're at and say that may be great for what you want to do, but that's just not where I'm at this year. And I may catch back up next year. Um, this has nothing to do with grief, but I'll tell you how what we had to do one time in our family was I come from a very large family. I think there's 18 grandkids. I don't know. I've lost track by now, but we were the type of family that every Thanksgiving we draw names for people. And we live in 6 states, so now I'm drawing a name for some little baby that I've never even seen yet, and they're 3 years old because they live on the East Coast. And I'm like, who's this? So now we're trading names anyway. So finally, my brother told me, he said, man, I would love to get out of this name drawing thing. He said, but everybody will hate me. And I said, hey, if you'll do it, I'll back you, and I'll do it too. Okay? So we knew it was 4 against 2. We had one brother who we had to sway, or at least one sister. We tried the sister. It wasn't working. There's no way they were going to change this deal. And so finally we made the announcement one year and said, we're not doing that anymore. And I thought the world was over. I thought they were going to kill us and just, disown us for life. And but we kind of stuck to our guns and said, listen, this is crazy. We're buying for people we don't know, we've never met. We're only going to see them once a year if we're lucky, because not everybody came every year to Christmas. And we just kind of had to stick to it and choose that's what. And so I think you just have to say, and the compromise I think would be, let me choose that day what I feel up to. In fact, I may say I'm coming, but that morning I may wake up and it just not be prepared for it. I will say this to you, if this helps. We've learned that most people really dread those big days, Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries. But if you have a plan for the day, then normally if you'll execute that plan, people will tell us later that the dread of the day was a lot worse than the day was after we got past it. All that makes sense. If you have a plan, if you just wake up and go, oh my gosh, it's Christmas, what I do. But if you have a plan, what you want to do, I'm going to go to the cemetery. I'm going to go to Sally's house for dinner, go to Betty's house for pie, and then I'm just going to go home and watch a cheesy Christmas movie, and I'm going to go to bed. If that's your plan and you execute that plan, that helps you. Usually on the other side, people will tell us, I feel okay about how it went. And the dread of the day was a lot worse. And I say the same thing with birthdays, anniversaries, the 1 year mark of the death, things like that. If you have a plan and execute the plan, it usually helps out better. Anything else? Over here, Mike. We do this to keep Mike in shape. So.
I'm having an issue because I lost my husband this year recently, and I have 3 kids, and they all want to get together for Christmas. The problem is I miss him more when I'm all together with the kids, so it's almost twice as hard for me to be with them, but I don't want to be without them, and I don't want to be alone, and my brother invited him to his house, but I don't want to be around people I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. I mean, What do you do when you don't know what you want to do?
Yeah.
Great
And kind of, it's a great question. What I'm hearing is that you definitely want to be around the kids. So maybe an option might be, I'll be there for a brief amount of time, or I'll be there for as long as I think I can stay. And if it just gets too hard and difficult, I'm going to sneak away. Or I'll catch Johnny's house Christmas Eve. I'll connect Betty's house Christmas morning. I'll be at Johnny's the day after. Maybe, I'll spend time with all of you, but maybe a few days before Christmas, the day after, just, if they're okay with that. And again, it goes back to this thing of compromise. It's like any relationship in the world. We have to agree to disagree sometimes and agree to just compromise and be flexible with anyone. Now, if you're working with somebody who's like, nope, that's what's going to happen, Mom. You're going to be there, and we're going to drag you over there.
And And I know that they're hurting
Yeah.
immensely too, so I don't want to make it harder for them. It's just a hard, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and I will say this coming from the perspective of a child who's lost both of their parents. If you're not there, that will be seeming like a kind of a double whammy to them because now it's not mom and dad are both not here. So there again, I think that's why I talk about say, come, I'll stay as long as I can. It goes back and forth between this thing all the time with grief and loss. This thing is we're all hurting, and so we all need to support one another where we're hurting at. And sometimes one of the big myths that we talk about in grief and loss in our classes is, well, I just have to be strong for everybody else. And I just say to that, I say, no, let somebody be strong for you for a while. So if you go to the house and you start to tear up, it's okay if your daughters come along and give you a big hug and say, Mom, we love you. It's okay. And then if you see the little granddaughter starting to cry, it's okay for you to go be strong for her for a little while. And that may change every 5-10 minutes. This person needs a little support, and this person needs a little support, and this one really needs to talk about granddad, and this one wants to walk away and go talk about the football game that's on TV. All of those are okay. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be. We get really set in our traditions sometimes, and we have to have the turkey, and you may not feel up to a turkey this year. Hy-Vee's got a pretty good one for $35 and a little pricey, but hey, it comes with some sides, and that stuff's okay too. You just really got to talk and work it out, which is why we're doing this on December the 4th and not December the 20th, right? It's going to take some time over the next few weeks to kind of get a feel for yourself and, like I said, what you're up to this year.
Yeah, that word permission, I hear that word kind of being inferred. Yeah, just give each other permission.
Yeah, Mike's right. Give each family permission to do what they feel like they want to do. And I wouldn't, don't be shocked or surprised if one of your kids the day before calls and says, wow, we thought we were up to this, and all of a sudden we're not. And we're going somewhere else for the day. And everybody be like, oh my gosh, what happened? Their grief just hit them. And boy, it can happen so quick.
And
Mike, do you see a hand
grace,
somewhere?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say that I think it's great that you mention the opportunity to support other people and that it's okay to be the strong person sometimes and to be the weak person.
Yeah.
I think that, and to recognize one of the things you've said quite a bit, Jeff, is that this year, but this is year 4.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily change that you still make the choices.
Mm-hmm.
It is your choice to find your path
Yeah.
through grief. So it's not just the first year, and
Right.
a lot of people in this room are first years.
Yeah.
And I'm far from it. I'm not
Yeah.
far enough. But there are things when you walk beside people who are grieving that it's okay to recognize that year 2 hurts in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And year 3, now you're further removed, and yet you don't want to be.
Yeah.
So give grace and accept it.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point is the fact that we live in this culture that says, well, if you can just get through the first year, you'll be okay. I don't know who wrote that, but they obviously hadn't lost anybody yet because, it's like this thing, well, you get through the first one, you'll be fine. And it's like, I've had people tell me, nobody told me there was going to be a second year and a third and a fourth and a 12th and a 15th. As I was walking around a while ago, and I don't remember where I was at, but I just heard briefly somebody say, I don't know if the holidays will ever be the same. And you're right. They won't, especially if there's been a loss of a child. There's that hole there that no one will ever fill. But also the loss of a parent. Because you just don't go down to the grocery store and pick up moms on clearance. You only have one mom. She's the only mom. And nobody replaces mom. And dads and children and spouses and nobody replaces them. And so to recognize that, to say that we get through this first year, and I hope I didn't imply that, if you just change it up this year and go right back to everything the second year. No, second year may be different too. Like I said, after both of our parents passed away, it really has never looked the same. And one part because we are so spread apart and everything. So people get together with whoever they do, and sometimes it works, and sometimes you don't. Yeah, it will always be different. The trick, I wouldn't say the trick, but the key to grief is to recognizing and learning how to live with what's new and different. During COVID, we had that stupid phrase that was going around that they just beat to death, the new normal, and we hate that terminology, but it's true. And it's learning how to navigate life differently now that they're gone. Sometimes I use the illustration of a chapter book. Anybody here like to read chapter books? You read a chapter book and you read a chapter and it's a really bad chapter, or it's got that cliffhanger ending, and the guy's hanging off the cliff, okay? And you're like, oh, I got to read the next chapter to keep me going. And then you find out either he fell off the cliff or he, which would be another bad chapter, or somebody saved him and rescued him, but he changed his life because of, what a chapter book does. All of you in this room have had a really bad chapter this year. It was a horrible chapter. Someone you loved died, and that wasn't good. The good news of that is that your book is not done being written. Your story did not end at that chapter, and you get to decide how the rest of the chapters are written. When my mother died, I wasn't really ready for it. I know it was in the sequence of things, as they say. And then when my dad died a few years later, I had a totally different relationship with my dad than I did my mother. So those losses were completely different, and my grief was totally different. And I had some real issues with God after my dad died. I was a little bit ticked. My dad was a truck driver. He was never around. He was gone a lot growing up. And even though he was in the home all the time, he wasn't there. He was just gone. And so things changed. Christmas morning was never the same again. It was totally different, and where we went and places, and I had to let that one be okay with me and learn that this is the next chapter of my life, and I want this chapter to look good for my kids and my grandkids, and then something else changes, and that chapter is going to have to be written differently now because we lost this person back in chapter whatever it was. Does that make sense? Like I said, the good news is you get to decide these new chapters. As awful as this last year's chapter was, the healing process is this chapter, and maybe even the next several chapters are still healing through that. And I think you'll always be healing to a great degree. The grief journey is not a sprint. In our culture, we say, well, if you're still grieving after 2 months, there's something wrong with you. If you're grieving after 6 months, oh my gosh, we've got to put you on medication. And because this is being recorded, I won't get started on that, but that's my soapbox. But in fact, they're trying to make grief after 6 months a mental illness. And people in our field are fighting this like crazy because it is not a mental illness. What it is, it's a heart condition. Your heart's been broken. You got a broken heart. And you need to be allowed to have time to heal that broken heart. And I believe it can heal with some right steps, but it takes time. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a lifelong journey. And it's going to look different for everybody in this room, too. That's a really long answer to a question you asked. I just realized how long that answer was. So, anybody else? All right, let's do this, and let me turn you over to the discussion questions on the table, because these will be some things that you'll want to talk about, especially if you've got family with you at your table. And I'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back.